What's up YouTube, and welcome to the Anabolic Outpost. And in today's recipe tutorial, I will be showing off my Anabolic cottage cheese curd pancake. Essentially, what I'm doing with this recipe is combining a potato pancake with a cheese curd. And if you're not from the Midwest, you might have no idea what I'm talking about, but you will see here very shortly where I'm going with this. This recipe is incredibly high in protein and anabolic. Although I don't think it carries as a main course, I will usually have it as a side dish. But don't get it twisted, the name pancake has nothing to do with breakfast. I will usually eat this as a side with dinner. But as always, you could try it out and figure out where it fits best into your diet. It's very low in fat too, so pre or post workout is a good option as well. So I'm sure you're incredibly intrigued on how this is going to go down, but first let me show you what you will need to make this recipe. The first ingredient is the star of the show, which is the fat-free cottage cheese, all-purpose flour, 2 whole eggs, and you could substitute 100 grams of egg whites if you'd like. Just know that the pancakes are going to be a lot more runny. Canola oil. Yes, you still have to track this, and I will be explaining why I'm using it in just a second. Your 0-calorie sweetener of choice. Kind of a weird ingredient, but it's not going to be sweet or anything. We just add a little bit. And finally, we have baking powder. I just took out a medium-sized measuring bowl and placed it on my scale. And the first thing I'm going to add into there is going to be 250 grams of the cottage cheese. Once the cottage cheese is in there, I'm going to go ahead and crack in the 2 whole eggs. And that's actually it for the wet ingredients, but you still want to go ahead and mix it in so that the egg can be nice and incorporated with the cottage cheese before the dry ingredients go in. I'm now going to add in 24 grams of flour, which is a bit of a controversial ingredient, especially for an anabolic sort of healthy recipe. But remember, it's not about the flour itself, it's about how much you eat, and I'm only going to be adding 24 grams into it. And compared to everything else that I'm adding into this recipe, it just makes it even more well balanced. It would also be incredibly hard to replicate that fried crispy texture on the outside without having some sort of breading to make it crispy in the first place. I'm now going to add in the sucralose, and yes, this is going to be a savory treat, but the sucralose just enhances the flavor in my opinion, and at the end of the day it is optional, but I really thought it was a more complete flavor when I added it in versus when I didn't. And finally, the last ingredient I'm going to throw in there is going to be 3 grams of baking powder. We now have all the ingredients in there, so you can go ahead and get in there and go ahead and mix the batter until it is mixed thoroughly. Just be sure there are no flour clumps in there, and then you will be ready to turn these into patties. So just to be sure that you're on the same track as me, this is what the batter looks like once it's done being mixed. It's not going to be super thick, it's still going to flow around in there, but still thick enough to build up a pancake. And you're now going to go ahead and set the stove to a medium heat, and you will go ahead and apply the canola oil on top of that surface. And yes, I weighed it out before and I added 14 grams worth of that. And I think you should be weighing this out to make sure that you're not overdoing it, because you can overdo it, and the next thing you know, the oil is more calories than the food itself. And this is a very rare instance in the anabolic kitchen where I do add oil when I'm cooking something in a skillet. Because yes, you could just spray it with cooking oil, but the texture is really not going to be the same. You need that oil so it crisp up on the outside. And once you've given the oil a few minutes to heat up on the stove, you would go ahead and apply the batter into 4 even pancakes. And it's probably easy to just pour the batter onto the stove, but if you've watched this channel before, you know that I like to get in there with my hands, so I just go ahead and just plop the batter down with my hands. And they should be slightly runny, as you could see here, but not runny enough to where they will flow into each other and just make a giant mess, and they still have some sort of shape. And that's honestly the best tip I could give you, is to just let these cook for at least 6 minutes before you even think about checking them, because if you go ahead and check them any earlier than that, the dough is going to get messed up and it's going to screw up the cooking times entirely, and it's also going to be sticky all over the place with the cottage cheese in there. Just let it sit and cook, so by the time you stick the spatula under there, it will already be a cooked and solid surface under. And just so you know, the cooking time per side on these is going to be 6 to 8 minutes. And I've now cooked these for about 8 minutes now, and you can see them starting to rise up already, and it is now time to go under there and flip. And what you're going to do is just go ahead and be aggressive with the spatula and just go ahead and get it under there in one swift motion. Don't go slow, otherwise it's going to mess up the entire texture of the pancake. And this is definitely the hardest part of the recipe and one of the harder things I will do on this channel, which is saying a lot because it's not that hard. And the worst consequence is that you will just have a bunch of cheese curd nuggets instead of having some solid aesthetic pancakes. That's alright though, because the food is food at the end of the day, and even I struggle after making these a few times already. I have now cooked these until they are crispy on both sides, and I even checked the middle on one to make sure that it is not still liquidy, and it is pretty solid. It's not supposed to be extremely solid though, so just keep that in mind. It is cheese, so it is going to be pretty gooey as well. And I'm now just going to scoop these up and just transfer them to my plate. And here we go. This is the final product here, the Anabolic cottage cheese curd pancakes. Pro tip for you guys that these things hold a lot of heat, so just be patient cool for 5 to 10 minutes before consuming. But after that, you will have a crispy and gooey snack that is also anabolic and healthy for you with all the cottage cheese that is inside of there. You really cannot go wrong with cottage cheese when it comes to eating well, especially when it's the fat-free cottage cheese. It is so low in calorie for the amount of protein that you get, and it is cheese after all. Who said that you can't eat cheese and have stuff like this when you're on a diet? And I've been hyping up the macros quite a bit, but let me just give you the lowdown on what it is for this entire recipe. You're going to be getting 48 grams of protein with 31 grams of carbs, 19 grams of fat for a total of 510 calories. So like I said earlier, that is pretty solid if you're just eating these as a meal. It is still good, but usually I'll just go for these as a side. I'll just eat 2 of them and share them with somebody else. And then I'll usually complement it with some sort of sliced meat with a carb or vegetable. But like I said, get creative and eat this at different times of the day so you know what time is best for you. But that's all I have for you today on this recipe tutorial. If you did have any questions or were confused about anything on the process of this video, comment them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible and try to help you there. Otherwise, if you found this helpful and delicious, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching and see you next time.